Jake Morrison stood at attention in the cold gray room, his jaw tight with anger. The three council members sat behind their curved metal desk, looking down at him like he was some kind of insect. Their alien faces showed no emotion, but Jake could feel their satisfaction. They had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison," the tall one in the middle spoke, his voice like grinding stones, "you have been found guilty of disobeying direct orders and interfering with official council business." Jake said nothing. He had known this was coming ever since he ordered his ship to protect that civilian transport last week. The council enforcers had been about to destroy it, claiming the passengers were carrying illegal cargo. Jake had scanned the ship himself. It was full of families running from a war zone, nothing more. "You humans think you know better than the council," the second member hissed, her snake-like tongue flicking out between her words. "You think your morals are more important than order. I think protecting innocent people is more important than following bad orders," Jake replied, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. The third council member, a creature that looked like a walking tree trunk, made a sound that might have been laughter. Innocent. Such a simple word, from such a simple species. Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he kept his face blank. Getting angry would only make things worse. These creatures had been ruling the galaxy for thousands of years, and they saw humans as nothing more than newcomers who needed to be taught their place. "Your punishment has been decided," the first council member continued. "You will be assigned to train with a partner. Someone who will teach you the value of following orders and accepting reality." Jake frowned. That didn't sound so bad. He had worked with partners before. Some had been good, some had been difficult, but he had always managed to get the job done. "Your partner will be from the Villani species," the snake-like creature said, and Jake could hear the cruel pleasure in her voice. "Perhaps working with one of the weakest species in the galaxy will humble your human pride." Now Jake understood. The Villani were famous throughout the council territories for being weak. They were small, fragile, and completely peaceful. They had never produced a single successful military officer. Most other species looked down on them as barely worth notice. The council was trying to humiliate him by pairing him with someone who would only hold him back. "The Villani lieutenant is already waiting for you in Training Facility 7, the tree trunk creature said. "You will report there immediately. Your training program will continue until we decide you have learned proper respect for council authority." "And if I refuse?" Jake asked. The first council member's eyes glowed with a cold light. "Then you will be stripped of your rank and sent to the prison colonies." "Your choice, human," Jake knew when he was beaten, for now. "I'll report to Training Facility 7? "Excellent," the snake creature hissed. "Try not to break your new partner too quickly. We would hate for this lesson to be over before it truly begins." Jake turned and walked out of the room, his back straight and his head high. He could hear the council members talking among themselves as the door closed behind him, but he didn't care what they were saying. He had more important things to think about. The walk to Training Facility 7 took him through the main corridor of the council station. Other officers from dozens of different species moved past him, some nodding respectfully, others giving him cold looks. Word traveled fast in the military, and everyone already knew about his punishment assignment. "Morrison!" a voice called out behind him. Jake turned to see Captain Lewis, one of the few other humans on the station. The older man jogged to catch up with him. "I heard about your assignment," Lewis said quietly. "This is bad, Jake, really bad." "It's just a training partner," Jake replied. "How bad can it be?" Lewis looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "The Villani have never had a successful military officer. Not one. They're physically weak, they panic under pressure, and they can't handle violence at all. The council is setting you up to fail. Then I'll just have to work twice as hard to make sure that doesn't happen." "You don't understand," Lewis said, grabbing Jake's arm. "This isn't about training. This is about breaking you. They want to watch you get frustrated, watch you fail, watch you give up. And when you do, they'll have proof that humans aren't as tough as we think we are." Jake pulled his arm free. "Then they're going to be disappointed," Lewis shook his head. "Jake, I've seen the reports on Villani training attempts. They wash out in the first week. Every single time, their nervous systems can't handle the stress. Maybe no one has tried the right approach before. Or maybe you're about to learn why the Council has been in charge of the galaxy for so long," Lewis said sadly. "They know exactly how to break people." Jake clapped his friend on the shoulder. "Thanks for the warning, but I'll be fine. I've, dealt with difficult situations before." "Not like this," Lewis called after him as Jake walked away. "Not like this." Training Facility 7 was located in the lower levels of the station, far from the main command areas. The corridors down here were dimmer and colder, and Jake could hear the distant hum of machinery. This was where they sent the failures and, the problems. Away from the important people, the facility itself was a large room filled with training equipment, computer stations, and practice areas. Most of it looked old and worn, like it hadn't been updated in years. Jake looked around for his new partner, expecting to see someone cowering in a corner or hiding behind a desk. Instead, he found a small figure sitting calmly in a chair near the back of the room, reading something on a tablet. She was definitely Villani, pale blue skin, large dark eyes, and thin limbs that looked like they would break if you touched them wrong. She was smaller than Jake had expected, maybe 5 feet, tall at most, but there was something about the way she sat that caught Jake's attention. She wasn't hunched over or nervous like he had expected. She was sitting straight, relaxed, like she belonged there. "You must be Lieutenant Morrison," she said, looking up from her tablet. Her voice was soft but clear. "I'm Lieutenant Zara. I've been waiting for you." Jake walked over to her, studying her carefully. She looked exactly like every description he had heard of the Villani: small, fragile, and completely harmless. But something about her didn't match what he had expected. "You can call me Jake," he said. "I guess you know why we're here." Zara smiled, and Jake felt an odd chill run down his spine. There was something about that smile that didn't seem quite right. It was too calm, too knowing. "Oh, yes," she said, setting down her tablet and standing up. "I know exactly why we're here. The Council thinks pairing you with someone like me will teach you humility. They think watching me fail will break your spirit." Jake was surprised by her directness. "And what do you think?" Zara's smile widened slightly, and for just a moment, Jake could have sworn he saw something dangerous flash in her dark eyes. "I think they've made a very interesting mistake." Before Jake could ask what she meant, Zara picked up her tablet again and walked toward the training equipment. "Shall we begin? I'm very curious to see how this works out." Jake followed her, his mind racing. Something about this situation wasn't what it seemed. The Council had told him he was being paired with the weakest species in the galaxy, but the small alien walking ahead of him didn't act weak at all. She acted like someone who knew exactly what she was doing, and that worried him more than he wanted to admit. The first day of training was exactly what Jake had been warned about. Zara failed every single test they gave her. During the physical fitness evaluation, she could barely lift the lightest weights. When they tested her running speed, she was slower than most children. The marksmanship test was even worse. She couldn't hit a target that was only 10 feet away. Jake watched from the sidelines, his frustration growing with each failure. The training instructors, 2 bulky aliens from the Krex species, made no effort to hide their amusement. They whispered to each other and laughed every time Zara stumbled or dropped something. "Is this really the best the Villani can offer?" one of them asked loud enough for everyone to hear. "No wonder they've never had a successful officer." Zara said nothing. She just picked herself up after each failure and tried again. Jake had to admire her determination. Even if her results were terrible, the combat simulation was the final test of the day. Jake and Zara were placed in a virtual reality scenario where they had to defend a small outpost against enemy attackers. Jake had done simulations like this hundreds of times. They were usually easy for experienced officers. "Remember," the instructor told them, "this is a team exercise. You must work together to succeed. The simulation began, and Jake immediately took charge. He positioned himself behind cover and began picking off the virtual enemies with precise shots. But when he turned to check on Zara, she was standing in the open, completely frozen. "Zara, get to cover!" He shouted. She didn't move. The enemy fire was coming straight at her, but she just stood there like a statue. Within seconds, her character was eliminated from the simulation. Jake fought on alone, but without a partner, he was quickly overwhelmed. The simulation ended with both of them listed as casualties. "Pathetic," the instructor growled. "Morrison, you're a decent soldier, but your partner is hopeless. How do you expect to succeed with dead weight like that?" Jake wanted to defend Zara. But what could he say? She had frozen up completely. He had seen new recruits panic before, but this was different. This was total paralysis. After the training session ended, Jake found Zara sitting alone in the corner of the facility, staring at her tablet again. She didn't look upset or embarrassed. She just looked calm, like nothing had happened. "That was rough," Jake said, sitting down next to her. "But don't worry about it. Everyone has bad days when they're starting out." Zara looked up at him with those large, dark eyes. "Did I do that badly?" Jake didn't know how to answer that. She had done worse than badly. She had been a complete disaster. But there was something in her voice that made him think she already knew that. "The simulation can be overwhelming the first time," he said carefully. "Maybe we should practice some basic drills tomorrow before we try anything complex." "That sounds reasonable," Zara agreed. "I'm sorry I let you down today." Jake studied her face, looking for signs of the stress and disappointment he expected to see. But Zara seemed perfectly relaxed. If anything, she looked almost curious, like she was watching an interesting experiment. The second day was no better. During weapons training, Zara couldn't figure out how to hold a rifle properly. She kept fumbling with the safety mechanism and couldn't remember which end was supposed to point at the target. When they practiced basic military movements, she tripped over her own feet and fell down 3 times. Jake tried to help her, but it was like trying to teach someone who had never used their body before. Every movement was clumsy and awkward. The other trainees in the facility started gathering around to watch, treating Zara's failures like entertainment. "Maybe the Villani should stick to growing flowers," one of them joked. "Military training is too hard for them." Jake felt his temper flare. "That's enough," he said sharply. "Everyone was a beginner once?" The alien who had made the comment, tall creature with gray skin and too many teeth, stepped closer to Jake. "Are you defending that pathetic excuse for a soldier? She's going to get you both killed." "She's my partner," Jake replied, his voice calm but dangerous. "Anyone who has a problem with her has a problem with me." The gray alien looked like he wanted to continue the argument, but something in Jake's eyes made him back down. The crowd dispersed, but Jake could hear them muttering among themselves. That evening, Jake stayed late to help Zara practice basic movements. The facility was empty except for the two of them, and the lighting was dimmer than during the day. Jake thought the quieter environment might help her focus. "Let's try the combat stance again," he said. "Remember, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent." Zara nodded and got into position. But as she moved, Jake noticed something strange. For just a moment, her stance was perfect. Her balance was excellent, her positioning was textbook. Correct. Then she seemed to catch herself and became clumsy again, stumbling and nearly falling. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I'm still getting used to this." Jake frowned. "Do that again." "Do what again?" "The stance." "You had it right for a second." There, Zara tried again, but this time she was all fumbling and awkward movements. Jake watched her carefully, but he couldn't see any trace of the brief moment of skill he thought he had witnessed. The third day brought tactical planning exercises. Jake and Zara were given a map and told to plan a defense of a strategic location. Jake had always been good at this kind of thinking, and he quickly began sketching out positions and patrol routes. "What do you think?" he asked Zara, showing her his plan. She looked at the map for a long time, her dark eyes moving across the terrain features. "It looks very good," she said finally. "You're much better at this than I am? Come on, give me some input." Two heads are better than one. I don't think I have anything useful to add, Zara replied. You're the expert. But Jake noticed that while she was studying the map, her finger had traced a small line along one of the ridges. When he looked more closely, he realized she had identified a perfect ambush position that he had completely missed. It was exactly the kind of spot an experienced tactical planner would notice immediately. This ridge here, Jake said, pointing to where her finger had been. That's a good observation. Zara looked surprised. I wasn't suggesting anything, I was just looking at the map. But you see how it overlooks the main approach route? It would be a perfect place to position snipers. Oh, Zara said, sounding genuinely confused. I didn't think of that. Jake stared at her. Either she was the luckiest guesser in the galaxy or she was hiding something. But what could she be hiding? And why would she want to appear weaker than she actually was? The fourth day was another combat simulation, this time with a different scenario. Jake decided to try a new approach. Instead of taking the lead immediately, he would hang back and see what Zara did when she thought she was on her own. The simulation started, and Jake positioned himself behind a wall where he could watch without being seen. Zara was supposed to advance to a checkpoint 50 meters away. Jake expected her to freeze up again or wander around helplessly. Instead, she moved with quick, careful steps, using cover effectively and keeping her head down. Her movement was smooth and efficient, nothing like the clumsy fumbling he had seen during training. She reached the checkpoint in record time. Then she seemed to remember something. She stopped, looked around nervously, and began moving in the awkward, stumbling way Jake had become used to. By the time she reached the extraction point, she was back to her usual clumsy self. Jake emerged from his hiding spot, his mind racing. Nice work getting to the checkpoint, he said carefully. Really? Zara asked, sounding pleased. I was worried I was moving too slowly. No, your timing was perfect. Almost like you've done this before. Something flickered in Zara's eyes, but it was gone so quickly Jake wasn't sure he had seen it. I've been reading about military tactics, she said. Maybe some of it is starting to make sense. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he had seen. The brief moment of perfect combat stance, the tactical insight she had denied making, the smooth, professional movement through the simulation when she thought no one was watching. Either Zara was the most naturally gifted soldier he had ever met, or she was playing a very dangerous game. And if she was playing a game, Jake needed to know what the rules were. He decided to test her. Tomorrow he would push harder and see if he could get her to slip up again. Because one thing was becoming clear, his weak partner was hiding something important, and Jake was going to find out what it was. Jake waited until the training facility was empty before confronting Zara. She was sitting in her usual spot, reading something on her tablet, looking as calm and innocent as always. But Jake had seen too much to believe the act anymore. We need to talk, he said, pulling up a chair directly in front of her. Zara looked up with those wide, dark eyes. About what? About the fact that you're not who you pretend to be? For a moment, Zara's expression didn't change. Then, slowly, a small smile appeared on her lips. It was different from her usual smiles. This one had edges to it. I'm not sure. What you mean, she said softly. Yes, you do. Jake leaned forward. I've been watching you. You slip up sometimes. Like yesterday in the simulation when you move like a trained soldier, or when you spotted that ambush position on the tactical map. Those weren't lucky guesses. Zara set down her tablet and studied Jake's face. And what if you're right? What if I'm not the helpless creature everyone thinks I am? Then I want to know why you're pretending to be one. Zara was quiet for a long time. She looked around the empty training facility, then back at Jake. When she spoke again, her voice was different, older, more serious. Tell me something, Jake. What do you know about Villani history? Jake frowned. Just what's in the standard council files. Your people evolved on a peaceful world, no wars, no predators, no conflict. That's why you're not suited for military life. That's what the council wants everyone to believe, Zara said. But it's not the complete truth. She stood up and walked to the window that looked out onto the training grounds. Other species were practicing combat exercises, their movements, sharp and aggressive. My world wasn't always peaceful, she continued. Long ago, before the Council even existed, there were two intelligent species on our planet. The Villani and something else. Something that thought we were weak prey. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What happened to them? They're gone now. Zara's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. They made the mistake of underestimating us. But the Council records say your people are pacifists. They say you've never fought a war. Zara turned back to him, and Jake saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. It was the look of a predator, cold and calculating. We didn't fight a war, she said quietly. We fought a hunt, and we weren't the prey. Jake stared at her. You're saying your people wiped out another intelligent species? I'm saying we survived when they didn't. Zara walked back to her chair and sat down. The other species was bigger than us, stronger, more aggressive. They had better weapons and more advanced technology. By every measure that matters to species like the Council, they should have won easily. But they didn't. No, they didn't. Because they made the same mistake the Council is making now. They thought strength was about size and weapons and loud threats. They never considered that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that looks like prey. Jake's mind was racing. How long did this war last? 3,000 years, the number hit Jake like a physical blow. 3,000 years of warfare was longer than human recorded history. That's impossible. No species could fight for that. Long, not fight, Zara corrected. Hunt, there's a difference. Fighting is loud and quick and obvious. Hunting requires patience. It requires making your prey come to you. It requires letting them think they're winning right up until the moment they realize they're already dead. Jake looked at this small, fragile-looking alien with new eyes. And you learned how to do this over 3,000 years. We learned many things. We learned how to appear weak while being strong. We learned how to make our enemies overconfident. We learned how to strike from shadows and leave no trace. Most importantly, we learned how to hide our true nature so well that even we sometimes forget what we really are. Is that what you're doing now? Hiding your true nature? Zara's smile returned, but now it looked completely different to Jake. It wasn't innocent or friendly. It was the smile of someone who knew secrets that could change everything. The Council thinks they're punishing you by pairing you with the weakest species in the galaxy, she said. They think watching me fail will break your spirit and teach you humility. But that's not what's happening. No, it's not. Because I wasn't assigned to you as punishment, Jake. I volunteered for this assignment. Jake felt his world shift. You volunteered? Why? Because my people have been watching the galaxy for a long time. We've seen how the Council treats other species. We've seen how they crush anyone who stands up to them. And we've been waiting for the right moment to do something about it. What kind of something? Zara leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. The Council's power comes from fear and division. They keep the different species separated and suspicious of each other. They make sure no one trusts anyone else. But sometimes someone comes along who changes that dynamic. Someone like me? Someone? Like you, a human who won't break, who inspires others to be brave, who makes alliances instead of enemies. The Council is afraid of you, Jake. That's why they're trying so hard to break you. Jake thought about this. So you're here to help me? Here to learn from you, and to teach you something in return. What could you possibly teach me? Zara stood up again and walked to a training dummy in the corner of the room. She moved differently now, without the clumsy stumbling Jake had grown used to. Her steps were silent and precise. I can teach you that strength isn't always what it appears to be, she said. Watch. She picked up a practice knife from the equipment rack. In her small hands, it looked like a toy. Then she moved. Jake had seen many skilled fighters in his career, but he had never seen anything like this. Zara's movements were so fast and fluid that his eyes could barely follow them. She struck the training dummy in a dozen different places. In the space of a few seconds, each strike precise and deadly. When she finished, the dummy was destroyed. Not damaged, completely destroyed. Pieces of it were scattered across the floor. Zara set down the knife and turned back to Jake. She wasn't even breathing hard. The council records list my people as physically weak, she said calmly. They base this on our size and our muscle density. What they don't measure is our reflexes, our precision, or our ability to find weak points that others can't see. Jake stared at the remains of the training dummy. How many of your people have this kind of skill? All of us? It's not special training, Jake. It's just what we are. We've been shaped by 3,000 years of survival against superior enemies. We learned that the only way to win was to be better than our enemies at everything that really mattered. And you've been hiding this from the council? We've been hiding this from everyone. The council thinks we're weak, so they ignore us. Other species think we're harmless, so they don't see us as a threat. It's the perfect cover. Jake walked over to the destroyed training dummy, kicking at the pieces with his boot. Why are you telling me this? Why reveal your secret? Because the time for hiding is almost over, Zara said. The council is getting more aggressive, more controlling. They're pushing too hard, and eventually they're going to push too far. When that happens, the galaxy is going to need leaders who understand. That strength comes in many forms. And you think I'm one of those leaders? I think you're exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Someone who won't bow to authority just because it's authority. Someone who protects the weak instead of exploiting them. Someone who builds alliances instead of destroying them. Jake turned back to her. What happens now? Now we continue our training. You'll keep being the stubborn human who won't break. I'll keep being the weak alien who somehow keeps surprising everyone. And while the council focuses on us, my people will continue preparing for what's coming. What's coming? Zara's smile turned predatory again. The day when the galaxy learns that the prey has been hunting the hunters all along. 2 weeks after Zara's revelation, the council announced a special war game exercise. Jake and Zara would command a small unit of mixed-species soldiers in a defense scenario against a much larger attacking force. The exercise was supposed to be impossible to win. Jake knew this was another setup. The council wanted to see him fail publicly in front of witnesses from across the galaxy. Military observers from dozens of different species would be watching the exercise. If Jake and his weak partner were humiliated here, it would send a message to anyone else thinking about challenging council authority. The scenario is simple, Commander Vex explained to the assembled observers. The large reptilian creature gestured toward a holographic display showing the battlefield. Morrison and his partner must defend Research Station Alpha for 6 hours, against overwhelming odds. The attacking force outnumbers them 4-1 and has superior equipment. Jake studied the tactical display. The research station was built into a mountain valley with only 3 approaches. It looked defensible, but not against the kind of force they were facing. The attacking army had heavy weapons, air support, and experienced commanders from the Krex warrior caste. This is meant to be a learning exercise, Commander Vex continued, his yellow eyes gleaming with amusement. We want to see how different command styles handle impossible situations. Jake glanced at Zara, who was standing quietly beside him. To everyone watching, she looked nervous and out of place. But Jake could see the subtle way her eyes were analyzing the battlefield display, noting every detail. Do you have any questions about this scenario? Commander Vex asked. Just one, Jake replied. What happens to the station personnel during the attack? They are to be evacuated safely. That is part of your mission objectives. Jake nodded. He had expected that. The council would never miss a chance to add more pressure to an already impossible task. The war game took place in a massive training complex that could simulate any kind of terrain. Jake and Zara arrived at their starting position to find 12 soldiers waiting for them. The mixed unit included species Jake had never worked with before. Some looked strong and aggressive. Others seemed nervous and unsure. Gather around, Jake called out. We don't have much time before the attack begins. The soldiers formed a rough circle. Jake could see doubt in their faces. They had heard about his punishment assignment, and they knew about Zara's reputation. Nobody expected this mission to succeed. "I know what you're thinking," Jake said. "This is supposed to be impossible. We're outnumbered and outgunned." But impossible just means nobody has figured out how to do it yet. "With respect, sir," one of the soldiers said, "the attacking force has 4 times our numbers and better weapons. How are we supposed to hold out for 6 hours? Jake looked at Zara. She gave him the smallest nod. "We're not going to hold out," Jake announced. "We're going to win." The soldiers looked confused. A few of them exchanged worried glances. "The enemy thinks they know what to expect from us," Zara said, speaking for the first time since the briefing. Her voice was still soft, but there was something different about it now, something that made the soldiers pay attention. "They expect us to dig in and wait for them to overwhelm our defenses," she continued. "They expect us to fight the way everyone always fights, with strength against strength, numbers against numbers." Jake picked up where she left off. "But we're not going to do what they expect. We're going to do something they won't see coming." Over the next hour, Jake and Zara explained their plan. It was unlike anything the soldiers had heard before. Instead of building fixed defenses, they would create the illusion of weakness while setting multiple traps. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, they would use misdirection and psychology to turn the attacker's own strength against them. "This is crazy," one soldier muttered. "It'll never work." "It'll work," Zara said quietly. And something in her voice made even the most skeptical soldiers believe her. The attack began at dawn. Jake watched from the command center as the enemy force approached the valley. They came in exactly the formation he and Zara had predicted: heavy armor in front, infantry following, air support overhead. It was a textbook assault, perfectly executed and completely predictable. "First phases go," Jake announced into his radio. "All units, execute alpha pattern." To the attacking force, it looked like the defenders were panicking. Soldiers appeared to be running randomly around the station, abandoning their positions and fleeing toward the mountains. The enemy commanders probably thought they had already won, but Jake and Zara had choreographed every movement. The apparent chaos was actually precise positioning. Every fleeing soldier was moving to a carefully planned location. "They're taking the bait," Zara observed, watching the tactical display. "Enemy advance units are moving faster than planned. They think we're collapsing. Good, signal phase 2. The trap began to close. What the enemy thought were abandoned defensive positions were actually carefully laid ambush points. As their advance units moved into the valley, they found themselves surrounded by hidden soldiers who appeared from nowhere. But Zara's real genius wasn't in the ambush tactics. It was in the psychological warfare. She had studied the Krex warrior culture and knew exactly how to manipulate their aggressive instincts. "Broadcasting false communications now," she reported. "They should be intercepting our panic signals any moment." Jake listened as Zara transmitted fake radio messages that made it sound like the human commander was losing control of his troops. The messages were perfectly crafted to make the Krex believe they just needed to push a little harder to achieve total victory. The enemy took the bait. Instead of maintaining their careful formation, they began rushing forward, eager to claim an easy win. Their disciplined advance turned into an uncoordinated charge. "Now they're fighting each other as much as us," Jake observed with satisfaction. "Their own eagerness is doing half our work." The battle raged for 3 hours. To the outside observers, it looked like a miracle. The tiny defending force was somehow holding off an army. But Jake could see what was really happening. Every enemy move was being anticipated and countered. Every attack was being turned into a trap. Zara moved through the command center like a conductor leading an orchestra. She tracked dozens of variables at once, adjusting their strategy in real time to respond to enemy movements. Jake had worked with brilliant tacticians before, but he had never seen anything like this. "Enemy morale is breaking," she reported. "Their commanders are starting to argue with each other over radio." "How can you tell?" "I've been monitoring their communications. Krex warriors blame each other when things go wrong. It's a cultural weakness. Jake shook his head in amazement. How do you know so much about Krek psychology? My people study everyone, Zara replied simply. You never know when information might be useful. By the 4th hour, the attacking force was in full retreat. What had started as an overwhelming assault had turned into a complete rout. The enemy commanders were so busy fighting among themselves that they forgot about the actual battle. When the exercise officially ended, Jake and Zara's force had not only survived the 6-hour defense, they had won a decisive victory. The research station was secure, all personnel had been evacuated safely, and the enemy army was scattered and demoralized. The observation deck was completely silent. Military officers from across the galaxy stared at the tactical displays in shock. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Commander Vex approached Jake with a puzzled expression. How did you do that? Jake glanced at Zara, who was standing quietly beside him, looking as innocent and harmless as ever. We used superior tactics, Jake replied, but the enemy had every advantage. Numbers, weapons, experience. They had advantages, Zara said softly. But they also had weaknesses. We just found them first. Commander Vex studied the small alien with new interest. And who exactly taught you to find weaknesses, Lieutenant? Zara smiled, that unsettling smile that Jake had learned to recognize. No one taught me, sir. Some things you just know. As they left the training complex, Jake realized that everything had changed. Word of their impossible victory would spread throughout the galaxy. Other species would start asking questions about the supposedly weak Villani, and the Council would begin to suspect that their punishment assignment had backfired in ways they never imagined. 3 days after the war game victory, Jake and Zara received an urgent mission assignment. Research Station Beta had gone completely dark 12 hours ago. All communication had stopped, and the automated distress beacon was silent. The nearest Council fleet was 5 days away, but Jake and Zara could reach the station in 18 hours. This is obviously another setup, Jake said as they prepared their small ship for departure. They're sending us into a dangerous situation hoping we won't come back. Zara checked the navigation systems with the same calm efficiency she brought to everything else. The timing is suspicious. Right after we embarrassed them in front of the galaxy's military observers. Do you think the station is really in trouble? Or is this just another test? Both, Zara replied. The Council is smart enough to use real crises to solve their political problems. If the station is under attack, they get rid of us and look like they tried to help. If we somehow succeed, they take credit for sending the right people. Jake studied the mission files on his tablet. Research Station Beta was a small facility built into an asteroid, studying something called quantum field manipulation. The crew was only 30 people, mostly scientists and a handful of security guards. What kind of threat could take out a research station so quickly? Jake wondered. According to the files, the station is in disputed territory near the Krex border. Zara said, pirates raid that area regularly, but they usually demand ransom instead of just destroying everything. Unless someone hired them to make sure there were no witnesses, the 18-hour journey gave them time to plan. Jake had worked rescue missions before, but never with a partner like Zara. She approached the problem like a puzzle, considering variables that Jake would never have thought of. If pirates took the station, they'll be expecting a Council rescue fleet, she said. Big ships, lots of firepower, standard assault tactics, but we're just one small ship with 2 people. Exactly. We can get close without being detected. By the time they realize we're not a supply shuttle, we'll already be inside. Jake looked at the schematics of Research Station Beta. The docking bay is too exposed. They'll have guards watching it. Then we don't use the docking bay. Zara pointed to a small maintenance hatch on the asteroid's surface. Emergency access point. Too small for a normal boarding party, but perfect for 2 people. When they reached the station, Jake's worst fears were confirmed. 3 pirate ships were docked to the main bay, and the station's lights were flickering irregularly. But there were no signs of fighting or destruction. Whatever had happened here had been quick and quiet. I'm reading 37 life signs inside the station, Zara reported from the sensor station. That's more than the normal crew. So the scientists are still alive, plus the pirates. It looks that way. But they're all concentrated in the main laboratory section. That's not normal for either a hostage situation or a standard raid. Jake frowned. What would make pirates and scientists work together? Fear of something worse than pirates. They approached the station carefully, using the asteroid's bulk to hide their ship from the pirate vessels. The maintenance hatch Zara had identified was on the dark side of the asteroid. Away from the main activity, the hatch opened into a narrow service tunnel that led toward the station's central core. Jake had to crawl through sections that were barely wide enough for his shoulders, but Zara moved through the tight spaces like she was built for them. Motion sensors ahead, she whispered, consulting a small scanner. 2 guards in the corridor. Outside the laboratory, we need to take them out quietly. Leave that to me. Jake watched as Zara disappeared into the shadows ahead of him. He had seen her fight in training, but this was different. This was real. Through the darkness, he heard the softest sound of movement, then nothing. A few minutes later, Zara reappeared. Clear, but you need to see this. The 2 guards were unconscious but unharmed, lying peacefully in a side corridor. Jake had no idea how Zara had moved them there without making any noise. How did you... Later, Zara said. We have bigger problems. They reached an observation window that looked into the main laboratory. What Jake saw inside made his blood run cold. The research team was huddled in one corner, clearly terrified. But they weren't afraid of the pirates who stood guard around the room. They were afraid of the thing in the center of the laboratory. It looked like a sphere of liquid darkness, about 6 feet across, floating 3 feet above the floor. The air around it seemed to bend and twist, and Jake could feel something wrong even through the thick window. The pirates were staying as far away from it as possible. What is that thing? Jake whispered. I think it's what the research team was studying. Zara replied, reading from her scanner. Quantum field manipulation. They were trying to create artificial gravity wells, and something went wrong. Very wrong. That thing is pulling matter into itself from across dimensional space. If it keeps growing, it could collapse this entire asteroid. Jake understood now why the pirates and scientists were working together. They were all trapped with something that could kill them all. Can we shut it down? Maybe, but we'd need to get to the control systems, and they're on the other side of that thing. Jake studied the laboratory layout. There was no way to reach the controls without getting close to the dark sphere. And from the way the air was bending around it, getting close might be fatal. There has to be another way, he said. Zara was quiet for a long moment, studying the scene below. There is, but you're not going to like it. Tell me. I go in alone. I'm small enough and fast enough to get to the controls before that thing can pull me in. Absolutely not. We go together or not at all? Jake, look at the size of that room. Look at how that thing moves. You're too big and too slow. I'm the only one who can make it. Jake wanted to argue, but he could see she was right. The sphere was moving in slow, hypnotic patterns, creating gravitational waves that would knock a human off balance. But Zara's size and reflexes might let her slip through the gaps. What about the pirates? They'll be too busy staying alive to worry about one small alien. Jake didn't like it, but he couldn't think of a better plan. How do I help? Create a distraction. Something big enough to make sure all eyes are on you instead of me. Jake nodded. I can do that. 5 minutes later, Jake kicked in the main laboratory door and charged into the room with his weapon drawn. Council security, everyone on the ground. The pirates spun toward him, shouting and raising their weapons. The scientists screamed and dove for cover. In the chaos, nobody noticed the small blue figure slipping along the wall toward the control station. Jake kept the pirates' attention by moving constantly, using lab equipment for cover and shouting orders. He didn't try to fight them directly. He just needed to keep them focused on him. Behind them, Zara reached the control systems and began working with desperate speed. Jake could see her fingers flying over the interface, trying to shut down the experiment before the dark sphere grew large enough to destroy them all. The sphere pulsed, growing visibly larger. Equipment around the laboratory began sliding toward it, pulled by its increasing gravitational field. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster," Jake shouted. "Almost there." Zara called back. One of the pirates noticed her and turned his weapon toward the control station. Jake shot him before he could fire, but the movement drew attention from the others. Now would be good. Jake yelled as more pirates turned toward Zara. The dark sphere pulsed one final time, then collapsed in on itself with a sound like reality tearing. The sudden absence of gravitational pull sent everyone stumbling as their inner ears readjusted to normal physics. In the silence that followed, Jake looked around the laboratory. The pirates were surrendering, the scientists were safe, and the deadly experiment was contained. Zara walked over to him, looking as calm as if she had just finished a routine training exercise. "Mission accomplished," she said simply, later. As they flew back to the council station with their prisoners, Jake realized something important had changed. Word of their success would spread even faster than news of the wargame victory. 2. Impossible victories in a row would make people ask serious questions about the supposedly weak Villani. "The council is going to be furious," he said. "Let them be furious," Zara replied. "My people have been patient for a very long time." "But patience has limits? What happens now?" Zara smiled, that dangerous smile Jake had learned to recognize. "Now the galaxy learns that the prey has been hunting the hunters all along. And you, Jake Morrison, just helped us take the first public step." As their ship approached the council station, Jake realized that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy was about to change, and he was looking forward to seeing what happened next.